I've changed the land that was in your name to mine. My eldest son's wife covertly changed the land I inherited from my late husband into her name. It's true that we've had our differences in the past, but I never imagined she would go as far as this. When I looked to my eldest son for help, he just stared at me with a cold gaze. You always bully my wife, Mom. You're the worst. If you feel even a bit guilty, just gracefully give the land to my wife and show some sincerity by living out your remaining years as a housemaid. My son was on his wife's side. Just to be clear, I never intended to bully her. In fact, I felt like it was me who was being bullied. But in this situation, I didn't think anything I said would get through. Feeling it was pointless to argue, I decided to leave, as my son's wife suggested. So, I should just leave, right? I asked. To which she retorted, not crying, huh? Pretending to be strong. But who is really pretending to be strong? What will happen after I leave? These two haven't realized it yet. My husband and I are both in our late 50s. We have 2 sons, both married and living away from home. So it's just the 2 of us now. We live in a rural area, exactly like what you'd picture. It's inconvenient without a car to the nearest station, and there's hardly a bus service, only 2 an hour even during commute times. And none on Sundays or holidays. The only store around is a liquor store that's more like a general store. Our eldest son always hated this rural setting. He wanted to attend a more prosperous nearby high school but ended up at a local agricultural school due to his grades. This led him to leave home as soon as he graduated. My eldest son married a woman he met while living in his dream city. Since then, he has continued to live in the city and seldom visits our family home. Even when they visited for their marriage introduction, it was just a few times, with no other contact. As family, there are times when we can't avoid each other. Traditionally, the wives handle the family matters, even though there's not much social interaction. So, whenever I had to meet my son's wife, I always had to go to her. Because she dislikes the countryside just as much. When I visit, they say, "You smell like the countryside," and spray deodorizer around me. At first, I didn't like it, but now I try to take it as a trivial matter. After all, our relationship is already distant, and I didn't want it to get any more awkward. Meanwhile, my younger son lives in a distant land due to his work. The town where my husband and I live is the same rural town where our younger son grew up, not much different from the countryside. My younger son says the drive isn't too bad, and often visits us, showing concern for us. My younger son's wife is a very charming woman, easygoing in nature, and shares similar values with us, so our relationship with her is incredibly good. Amidst all this, my husband passed away while still in his late 50s. I was engulfed in sadness by this sudden misfortune. Before he died, my husband often said that his only wish was for me not to struggle and to live out the rest of my life well after he's gone. He said that if the land and house that his ancestors had passed down became a burden or hindered my life in any way, I should prioritize my life first. In other words, he meant that once I inherit them, I can do as I please. While he was alive, he discussed this with our eldest son, who traditionally would inherit the land and house. But our city-averse eldest son, particularly his wife, vehemently rejected the idea, saying, "Why inherit useless countryside land when it's not prime city property?" So, they opted for something else. The younger son also chose to inherit something other than the land and house. I later learned from my younger son that he thought it best for me to inherit the property because it was filled with memories of my husband and me. My younger son and his wife considered moving back to live with me, but it proved too much of a burden on his commute, so they gave up on the idea. Still, they've told me, "Don't struggle alone. If it ever becomes unavoidable, we'll welcome living together in the family home." I don't intend to sacrifice my sons' lives for the sake of the land and house. When the time comes, I'm prepared to make a clean break. So, I ended up inheriting the land and house, while my sons equally divided the rest of the property. After my husband's death, development in the neighborhood began, and the value of the land started to rise. I'm in my 60s now, but I still have the energy and enthusiasm to enjoy life in the countryside. Some people, disliking the development, moved even deeper into the mountains, and everyone has their own opinion about it. For me, if supermarkets and such are built nearby, I won't need to drive, and it seems like it could prevent family disputes over issues like giving up driving licenses in old age. Most importantly, if it reduces the worries of my caring younger son and his wife, I think development isn't all bad. Now, I'm honestly excited about the prospect of a more convenient life, but I never imagined that my peace would be disturbed by an unexpected move from my eldest son's wife. As development progressed and rumors started about more bus services to the nearest station and a new high-rise apartment nearby, I got a call from my long-estranged eldest son. He said something like, "My job in the city didn't work out, and I ended up quitting." Trying to make a fortune in the city was a fleeting dream for someone born and raised in the countryside. I bluntly asked him what he really wanted to say. Then, he said he wanted to move back and live in the family home. I asked, "So, you mean you want to live together?" And he seemed to agree, but his answer was somewhat evasive. Just about a month ago, we had a family gathering for my husband's 3rd memorial anniversary. During that time, my eldest son kept complaining about the countryside smell, just as usual. I wonder what changed his mind. In the middle of our conversation, my eldest son's wife suddenly interrupted. "You live in such a lovely place. If there's going to be land development and modernization, you should say so. Trees in the mountains have been cut down, improving the view. There have been rumors for quite a while about a large shopping mall coming to that area." My eldest son's wife, who never cared for this countryside land, now says it's a different story if the area becomes more livable due to development. The land and house my husband left behind are in a great location. Besides the place where our house stands, I also inherited the mountain behind our house from my husband. Will there be land purchases for the development? Are you selling the mountain behind? It seems my eldest son and his wife regret not caring about the countryside land before. Now, unable to ask for the land, they are cozying up to me, probably hoping for a share of the money if I sell the mountain. Oh, no. How could I? It's not really about the money, but about my husband," she said, with quite a bit of acting in her tone. I listened to her with skepticism, feeling like I was enduring a poor speech. To summarize, it seems true that my eldest son lost his job and is now unemployed. Their savings are so low that even next month's rent is in jeopardy. When I asked, "What about the inheritance you and your younger brother split?" she said they'd rather not touch it if possible. Since my husband's 3rd memorial anniversary just ended, she wants to ponder a bit more about how to use the remaining money. But if they're struggling, I thought they should use it. I held back from saying that, as it might be taken as cold-hearted. Struggling to pay for gas and electricity after rent, my eldest son's wife tearfully appealed. "Please let us live with you." "So, you're going to live in the countryside? You, who always hated it and clung to city life, think you can manage here?" I asked my eldest son if he planned to find a job in the countryside. I also suggested it might be better for him to find work in the city. I couldn't imagine my eldest son, who left for the city as if running away, now accepting a rural life. He said, "It's a matter of survival. We might soon struggle even to eat, so I need help." Until the end, he didn't clearly say whether he would look for work in the city or the countryside. So, I set conditions. Living together would be temporary, just until he finds a new job. I also added that he must work, even if it's just a part-time job. With the land development here, there were plenty of short-term job opportunities. I thought he would be hired if he wasn't picky. I figured that taking care of them for about half a year would save up some money and allow my eldest son and his wife to restart. Marriage is about helping each other. Naturally, I expected my eldest son's wife to work outside, even if not every day, to contribute to their fresh start. However, when we actually started living together, my plans fell apart. True to his word, my eldest son spent his days job hunting. He looked for jobs during the day and worked as a security guard at a construction site in the evening. At first, my eldest son's wife seemed cooperative, but as he started spending more time away for job hunting and work, she suddenly changed her attitude. Ugh, this is so annoying. I can't deal with this. Shopping with a pickup truck, it's just too much for me. Shopping had become a once-a-week affair, and a pickup truck was more practical for that purpose than a fancy city car. It was my eldest son's wife who had initially offered to do the shopping. But after going once, she refused to do it again, saying it was embarrassing to use a pickup truck. When my eldest son was around, she'd say things like, "The food I cook is delicious," or "I want to learn, please teach me." But when he wasn't there, she'd say the complete opposite. "I can't stand this country-style cooking. I want French cuisine," she'd start. She'd call traditional home cooking annoying and skip her turn to cook. One day, my eldest son's wife said she'd cook dinner, so believing her, I went to tend to the mountain behind our house. Regular maintenance is necessary to prevent the mountain from becoming overgrown. Especially important are things like seasonal changes and leaf removal. Since my husband passed, I've been hiring young people from the village to help. But I couldn't always leave it to others, so I occasionally checked on it myself. After a tiring afternoon, I returned home to find it dark and locked, unable to get in. I couldn't reach my eldest son's wife on her phone, and just as I was wondering what to do, my eldest son returned. As I was explaining the situation, my eldest son's wife arrived and I asked her why she'd locked the house and where she'd been. "How could you? I did exactly as you asked and went shopping, and now you forget," she retorted. She then explained to my son that I had demanded an unreasonable dish and threatened to kick her out if she couldn't make it tonight. I hadn't said any such thing, and didn't even know she'd left the house. But my son took her side without question. "Just because we're living together reluctantly, doesn't mean you can bully my wife. She's not used to country life. It's impossible to find ingredients for fancy cooking here." He accused me of intentionally making things difficult for his wife. My son and I had our differences and had argued before, but being unfairly scolded like this was a first. Even though he was my son, he felt like a stranger, which was sad. I didn't expect him to always take my side. But in a good marriage, husbands usually side with their wives. My late husband always sided with me, but always listened to both sides, which kept our relationship with my mother-in-law smooth. But this one-sided belief in his wife's words and yelling at me was something else. Suddenly, my son got angry and said, "Fine, you make that fancy dish yourself and eat as much as you want. I'm going out to eat with my wife," and he threw the house keys at me before leaving. When I entered the house, nothing had been done, it was just as I left it in the morning. I felt so frustrated and couldn't stop crying. But there was so much to do that I ended up doing the chores while crying. The other day, the owner of a diner where my eldest son had eaten out asked me, "Is everything okay with your eldest son and his wife living with you?" This diner is the only one in the area, and we used to go there as a family when the kids were little. It's run by a childhood friend of my husband's, and my eldest son knows his dad was fond of this place. It seems that my son and his wife were bad-mouthing me there. I got the impression that it's mostly the daughter-in-law feeding these negative thoughts to my son. I didn't go into details, just thanked the owner saying, "Thanks for letting me know." The owner said, "If you ever need anything, feel free to ask for help," and thankfully didn't pry too much. But he did seem sad, saying, "To think that the eldest son, who I thought of as my own, would just swallow his wife's words." Do people change that much when they move to the city? After this, I decided not to expect anything from my daughter-in-law. If my efforts to get along don't get through to her, then it's just a waste of time. It's better to spend that time and effort doing household chores myself. If I retaliate for what's been done to me, I'm no different from her. As usual, I prepared meals for 3 and did the laundry for 3, no matter what my daughter-in-law did. Whether she took it for granted, thinking she had me cornered, or felt lucky about how things turned out, she continued to stay with an air of entitlement. Then one day, my son said something unbelievable. "About the land and house in your name, I'm changing it to my name." He showed me the documents, saying they were all ready. But he didn't let me get a clear look, so I became suspicious of his wife's story. Having seen the necessary documents for a name change many times from my husband, these looked obviously fake to me. When I asked his wife, "Is this real?" she snapped back, "Of course it is. From now on, I'll be the boss here. If you don't want to be kicked out, you'd better show some remorse for how you've treated me as your daughter-in-law. How about continuing as my personal maid? If not, you're welcome to leave." Her confident attitude made it seem like she believed the documents were real. I confronted my son, asking, "What's this about?" He retorted, "If you can't keep the promise of living together, then you should be the one to leave." I tried to reason with him, but he accused me of being the first to break our agreement. It's shameful to be raised by the worst mother who bullies her daughter-in-law. If you feel bad, just retire and leave everything to your son. You shouldn't take out your hatred for me on my wife. It's the lowest thing to do. Aren't you embarrassed, being a grown woman acting like this? It seems my daughter-in-law convinced him that I hate my son and therefore treat her harshly. The daughter-in-law, having heard from my eldest son about our differences in values and how we never really got along, probably used that to her advantage. Since my relationship with my eldest son wasn't great to begin with, it must have been easy for her to make it worse. I realized that nothing I say to my son now, no, anything I say, he won't believe. I felt it was a waste of effort to persuade him and remembered my husband's words. "All right, I'll listen to everything you two say. But give me a week to prepare." My daughter-in-law was reluctant, but my son agreed. I needed a week to sort out what to take with me, find a new place to live, and handle other necessary arrangements. A week later, as promised, I left the house. As I was leaving, my daughter-in-law taunted me with a triumphant look, "Get out already." But without reacting, I left the house silently, taking a mental victory pose. This was the start of my counterattack. I was looking forward to what would happen in a month. A month later, as I expected, I got a call from my eldest son's wife. She was furiously excited, saying that she tried to sell the land immediately to get cash, but it was already under development and she was refused. She bombarded me with a tirade of angry words, screaming, "What did you do?" In reality, there had been talks about selling the land along with the hill behind it as part of an area development plan. The condition was to sell them as a set. It was a welcome offer for me, since managing the hill on my own was challenging. However, I had wanted to live a bit longer in the house I shared with my husband, so I had put the sale on hold. During this time, the issue of the house's aging came up. A relative who works in construction visited on my husband's death anniversary and mentioned concerns about the aging of the house, which had been in our family since my grandparents' time. It felt so large living alone in a house that once housed 3 generations. I couldn't deny feeling a bit lonely in it. I started to think that it might be good to sell it after my husband's 7th death anniversary. Even if I rebuilt it, my sons were unlikely to live there. The company interested in buying the land and hill said the development would take years, so there was no rush. But living with my eldest son and his wife shifted my plans slightly. And I decided to sell before my husband's 7th death anniversary. The company even offered to bear the cost of demolishing the house and clearing the land, which was a relief. I couldn't stand the thought of my son's wife, believing in a fake contract, taking over the land my husband left behind. I didn't want to yield it to her or my son, who blindly followed his wife without any doubt. I informed my second son about the situation and my decision. He said, "It's sad to lose the house of memories, but memories are in the heart, not in things, so don't worry." Furthermore, my second son and his wife had invited me to live with them. "We understand it might be hard to leave familiar surroundings, but our place is quite rural too, so you might like it." Touched by their kindness, I'm now living with my second son and his wife. I ignored my eldest son's wife's rantings, ending the call and blocking her number when appropriate. Later, my eldest son, having asked relatives about my whereabouts and finding me, came to my second son's house, begging me for help. I almost sent him away, thinking it was too late, but he began to confess it was all orchestrated by my wife. He then told me everything that happened after they drove me out. This all started when my eldest son's wife's friend introduced her to a judicial scrivener. Trusting her friend, she believed everything the scrivener said without question. including that she could change the land and house from my name to hers just by paying a small gratuity, which was even less than half the going rate. Thinking she'd come into a lot of money soon, she decided to cover any shortfall with my husband's inheritance. On the appointed day, the friend and the scrivener prepared the transfer documents and gave them to her. And she, without any doubt, believed them to be genuine and paid the gratuity. Once all the preparations were done, she explained everything to my eldest son when he returned from his part-time job. Tired as he was, he didn't think deeply and trusted her because she said so. If you think about it, it's absurd that the wife of a living son would become the owner of his family home. It'll be more convenient for your mother if it's in my name. As fellow housewives protecting the same home, we can have an open and honest discussion. Convinced by such seemingly reasonable words, he ended up agreeing. While my son was busy with job hunting and his part-time work, she meticulously planned to drive me out, brainwashing my son in my absence, and successfully made him do her bidding. However, when she triumphantly went to sell the newly acquired house and land, she was told it was impossible because it was already being developed. Panicking, she tried to contact her friend and the scrivener but couldn't reach them. Eventually, their phone was disconnected, and when she contacted the friend's parents, they said they had disowned the criminal and didn't know their whereabouts. That's when she found out her friend had been committing fraud repeatedly and had become a criminal. She later learned that several of her former classmates had fallen victim to this friend. The friend would introduce former classmates to fake lawyers, accountants, and judicial scriveners, taking commissions from them. When my son's wife mentioned the land, she was introduced to someone playing the role of a scrivener. Some victims had filed police reports, while others resigned themselves to considering it a costly lesson. But these people had homes to go back to, even after losing money. For my son and his wife, it was more than just losing money. They lost their home and the inheritance, so their immediate concern was not about filing a police report but how to deal with the situation. When I suggested they could rent an apartment since most of the inheritance should still be there, my son revealed that the cash card for the account where the extra money was deposited had been swapped. And all the money was withdrawn by the time they realized. They were literally penniless and begged me for help, with my son pressing his forehead to mine. Apparently, they were charged extra because the creation of the fake transfer documents was supposedly difficult. My son's wife went to withdraw the money with her friend, who likely stole the ATM pin then. Professionals can swap cards without being noticed. My son's wife, driven by short-term greed, lacked caution. Talking openly about the inheritance money probably made her an easy target. A little while ago, there had been warning messages circulating from my eldest son's wife's alma mater. They warned that some alumni were defrauding their classmates and juniors, advising everyone to be cautious about contacts or solicitations from people they hadn't been in regular communication with. But she had arrogantly dismissed it, saying, "Only fools fall for scams." I told them it was their own doing, driven by greed, and refused to help. There should still be some money that my son had saved from his part-time job. But he dismissed it, saying, "There's no way I saved any of that meager part-time job money. It all went to drinks with friends." Apparently, he had spent all the money he initially saved on going out drinking with his coworkers. "I'm not to blame for your lack of planning," I said, pushing my eldest son away once again. As I was getting frustrated with his persistent pleading, my daughter-in-law from my second son's family came home. Seeing her formidable presence, my eldest son might have felt a sense of danger and decided to leave. My daughter-in-law enjoys physical activities and recently started learning self-defense. She happened to return from her class just as my eldest son was there, and he got scared and ran off on his own. "I'm grateful for your timely return," I said to her, expressing my thanks. Later on, the eldest son and his wife started working as live-in staff at the diner run by my husband's childhood friend. However, they were soon kicked out for continually complaining about the low wages compared to the city. Do they not know how to repay someone's kindness? After that, nobody was willing to help them. One day, while living in cardboard boxes, they saw a new house being built on the land where our family used to live. My son's wife, in a fit of madness, broke into the house. "This is my land and house. It was supposed to be mine," she ranted, squatting in the house, which led to her arrest by the police. When the police contacted me to take responsibility for her, I refused. She then started a silent protest, refusing to speak unless I came. Even when the police asked for my help in persuading her, I refused. When they relayed that my son was asking for help, I said, "I have no obligation to help. Please, just put him behind bars." When arrested, my son's wife claimed she was deceived by fraud. While it seems she was believed due to similar complaints, it didn't erase her crimes. The fraudsters, her friend, and the fake scrivener, are still at large. And I heard that even if caught, the money they took won't be returned. It seems this ordeal has finally opened my son's eyes, not just about being swindled but also about misusing the inheritance. The couple eventually divorced. My son, unable to find stable work, seems to be struggling, while his ex-wife, fed up with rural life, returned to the city and worked in a bar at the city's edge. However, she suddenly disappeared one day. Apparently after accumulating significant debt. I've now officially started living with my second son and his family. Initially, our cohabitation was on a trial basis due to the situation with my eldest son's family. I didn't want to be a burden to my daughter-in-law. But living together turned out to be harmonious. We can speak our minds without tension, and my daughter-in-law, who is not overbearing, and I get along very well. We share similar tastes in food, exchange recipes, and enjoy our days together. Our relationship is so good that neighbors think we're actually mother and daughter. As my husband wished, I'm now enjoying the rest of my life with my second son's family. I visited my husband's grave, looking forward to sharing these stories with him.